He paraded her on his arm like a trophy, a beautiful, delicate thing he'd acquired. But he never saw the woman, only the wife. He told his glittering circle of friends that his pregnant wife, Genevieve, was too tired for events, painting a picture of a fragile creature needing her rest. He was the magnate, the genius Jonathan Davenport. She was just the pretty incubator for his heir. But while he was schmoozing under the chandeliers, she wasn't sleeping. She was planning. And the very next day, the woman he'd dismissed as too weary for a party took the one thing he loved more than himself, his company. This isn't a fairy tale. This is the story of how a woman pushed to the edge, took back her power, one boardroom at a time. The chandeliers in the grand foyer of the Davenport estate dripped crystals like frozen tears, each one reflecting the cold, pristine opulence of the life Genevieve Davenport was living. Or more accurately, the life that was being lived around her. At 7 months pregnant, she felt less like the lady of the manor and more like another one of its impeccably chosen, inanimate objects, beautiful, valuable, and utterly silent. "Darling, you look pale," Jonathan said. His voice, a smooth, practiced caress that no longer soothed but scraped against her nerves. He adjusted the knot of his Tom Ford tie in the enormous gilt mirror, his eyes not on her, but on his own handsome reflection. "Are you sure you're up for the gala tonight? It's going to be a long evening." Genevieve ran a hand over the gentle swell of her stomach, the silk of her robe cool against her skin. The baby kicked a secret flutter of rebellion only she could feel. "I'm fine, Jonathan. A little tired, but I wouldn't miss the Davenport Foundation Gala for anything. It's our biggest night. Our night." The word tasted like a lie. It was his night. It was always his night. Jonathan was the CEO of Davenport Industries, a sprawling global conglomerate he had inherited from his father and through a series of ruthless acquisitions had tripled in value. He was a titan of industry, a darling of the financial press, a man whose ambition was a furnace that threatened to consume everything and everyone around him. She was merely Mrs. Davenport. He finally turned from the mirror, his gaze sweeping over her, not with concern, but with critical assessment. "You say that, but you can barely make it through dinner without needing to lie down. I can't have you fainting in the middle of my speech. Think of the optics." He smiled, a flash of brilliant white teeth that didn't reach his cool blue eyes. "I'll just tell everyone you're nesting. They'll understand. Pregnant women are always so tired." There it was, the casual, patronizing dismissal that had become the background music of their marriage. He wasn't protecting her. He was managing her, hiding her away, as if her pregnancy were a temporary disfigurement that might mar the perfect portrait of his life. "I'm not an invalid, Jonathan," she said, her voice quiet but firm. "I'm pregnant. I'm perfectly capable of attending an event. Genevieve, don't be difficult." His tone shifted, the velvet glove sliding off to reveal the iron fist. "I've already made up my mind. Bryce will be here in an hour to go over the quarterly reports with me before we leave. I need to be focused. I don't have time for this debate." Bryce Montgomery, Jonathan's sycophantic chief operating officer, a man whose spine seemed to have been surgically removed to allow for more efficient bootlicking. Genevieve couldn't stand him. Defeated, she nodded, turning away before he could see the sting of tears in her eyes. "As you wish. That's my girl," he said, planting a kiss on the top of her head before striding out of the room. His expensive cologne lingering in the air like a taunt. Alone in the cavernous bedroom, Genevieve walked over to the floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the manicured gardens. In the distance, the skyline of the city glittered a world away. She had entered this marriage 3 years ago, with stars in her eyes, captivated by Jonathan's charm, his ambition, his seemingly endless adoration for her. He had called her his muse, his anchor. He had praised her sharp mind, a first-class honors degree in economics from Wharton, a mind he now seemed determined to let atrophy. In the beginning, she had tried to be involved. She'd offer opinions on market trends, suggest diversification strategies, even point out a potential flaw in a merger agreement. He would listen with a patient smile, pat her hand and say, "That's very cute, darling, but why don't you leave the number crunching to me and Bryce? You have a much more important job." Her job, she soon learned, was to be beautiful, to host flawless dinner parties, and to be a slunt, smiling accessory at his side. And now to produce his heir. She was living in a gilded coup, and the bars were closing in tighter every day. But Jonathan underestimated her. He saw the gentle, accommodating wife he had molded. He didn't see the woman who late at night, when he was asleep, read not gossip magazines, but financial journals. The woman who tracked stock market fluctuations with a hawk-like intensity. The woman who had maintained a secret correspondence with her old university mentor, a man who now sat on the board of several Fortune 500 companies. He thought she was too tired for an event. He had no idea she was preparing for a war. She picked up her phone, not the one Jonathan had bought her, but a sleek, encrypted burner phone she kept hidden in a hollowed-out copy of War and Peace. She sent a single, coded text message. "The dove is grounded. Time to release the eagle." The reply came back almost instantly. "The nest is ready. All assets are in position, awaiting your signal." A slow, determined smile touched Genevieve's lips, a smile Jonathan would not have recognized. He was right about one thing. It was going to be a long evening, just not in the way he imagined. While he was basking in the glow of the gala's spotlights, she would be orchestrating the most significant hostile takeover he had ever faced. And the target wasn't some rival corporation. It was his own. The Davenport Foundation Gala was the social and philanthropic event of the season. It was a symphony of clinking champagne glasses, air kisses, and the low hum of power brokers making deals under the guise of charity. Jonathan Davenport stood at the center of it all, a king in his court. He was utterly in his element. "Jonathan, my boy." "Another triumph," Senator Phillips boomed, clapping him on the shoulder. "The speech was magnificent, a true leader." "We do what we can, Senator," Jonathan said with practiced humility. He scanned the room, a predator surveying his domain. "It's all about giving back, and of course ensuring a stable economic future for us all." The unspoken addendum under my guidance hung in the air. He moved through the crowd, a magnetic force. He schmoozed with bankers, flirted with heiresses, and shared confident laughter with his COO, Bryce Montgomery, who shadowed him like a nervous puppy. "Where's the lovely Genevieve?" asked Veronica Lancaster, her voice a sultry purr. Veronica was the CEO of Lancaster Innovations, a tech rival Jonathan both despised and desired. She was sharp, ruthless, and wore a red dress that seemed poured onto her statuesque frame. "Ah, Veronica, always so direct." Jonathan chuckled. "The little mother-to-be is resting at home. You know how it is. She gets so tired, needs her beauty sleep." He leaned in conspiratorially. "Frankly, it's a relief. These events can be such a bore for her. Her mind is on, well, you know, nursery colors." Veronica's perfectly arched eyebrow rose a fraction of an inch. Is that so? I always found Genevieve to be remarkably astute. I sat with her at that tech luncheon last spring. She asked some incredibly insightful questions about our AI integration. Jonathan waved a dismissive hand. She parrots things she's heard me say. She's a quick study. The lie was effortless, a testament to how often he had to diminish his wife's intelligence to feed his own ego. He didn't want a partner. He wanted a mirror that reflected only his own brilliance. Meanwhile, miles away from the glittering ballroom, Genevieve was anything but tired. The guest bedroom of their sprawling mansion had been transformed into a command center. A bank of monitors displayed encrypted communications, stock tickers, and the private schematics of Davenport Industries' corporate structure. Her old mentor, a shrewd and fiercely loyal man named Philip Abernathy, sat opposite her, a phone pressed to his ear. "The consortium is holding firm," Philip said, covering the receiver. "They're all in. They've been waiting for a reason to push back against Jonathan's arrogance for years. Your play is giving them the cover they need." Genevieve's face was illuminated by the blue glow of a laptop screen. She was cross-referencing shareholder lists with voting records, her mind a whirlwind of calculations. For the past year, she had been using her own substantial trust fund, a fact Jonathan had always treated as her little shopping allowance, to quietly, painstakingly acquire shares in Davenport Industries through a series of shell corporations. She'd leveraged her knowledge of the company, gleaned from the reports Jonathan so carelessly left lying around, to identify undervalued assets and disgruntled investors. She was the ghost in his machine, the silent partner he never knew he had. "What about the Petrov account?" she asked, her voice crisp and authoritative. "Nicholas Petrov holds 10%. He's an old friend of Jonathan's father. He's the key." "Petrov is the last holdout." Philip admitted, his expression grim. "He's sentimental, loyal to the family name." "Loyalty has its limits," Genevieve countered. She pulled up a file on her screen, one she had spent months compiling. It was a detailed analysis of Jonathan's recent ventures, a disastrous foray into South American mining that cost the company nearly $1 billion, a series of risky derivatives trades that bordered on illegal and the exorbitant company-funded lifestyle he enjoyed. Jonathan is not his father. His father built this company on integrity and innovation. Jonathan is turning it into his personal piggy bank, and he's gambling with its future. Nicholas Petrov is a businessman first and a sentimentalist second. Show him the numbers. Show him what Jonathan is doing to his friend's legacy. She paused, her hand instinctively going to her belly. And remind him that the future of the Davenport name is no longer just in Jonathan's hands. It's in mine, too. And I have no intention of letting my child inherit a bankrupt empire. Philip nodded, a look of profound respect in his eyes. He relayed the message, his voice low and urgent. Genevieve watched the live feed of the gala on one of her monitors. She saw Jonathan laughing, preening, accepting accolades for a success that was rapidly becoming a mirage. He was so confident, so utterly blind to the storm that was about to break over his head. He had called her tired. He had called her weak. He had relegated her to the sidelines of his life. But from those sidelines she had seen the whole field with perfect clarity. She saw his weaknesses, his vanities, his fatal flaws, and she was about to use them all against him. The call from Philip's contact ended. He looked at Genevieve, his expression unreadable. "Petrov is in," he said simply. "He wants to see the documents firsthand, but he's agreed to vote with us in the morning. He said He said he's not protecting the man. He's protecting the name. A wave of relief so intense it was almost painful washed over Genevieve. It was done. The final piece of the puzzle had clicked into place. She had a controlling interest. She looked at the screen at the man she had once loved, the man who was now her adversary. He raised a glass to the adoring crowd. "To the future of Davenport Industries," he declared. Genevieve allowed herself a small, cold smile. "Indeed," she whispered to the empty room. "To the future." The morning sun sliced through the blinds of Jonathan Davenport's office on the 80th floor, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. He felt hungover not from alcohol, but from an excess of his own success. The gala had been a triumph. He'd schmoozed, he'd charmed, he'd secured a verbal commitment from Senator Phillips for a lucrative government contract. He was invincible. So when his assistant, a perpetually flustered young woman named Chloe, buzzed in to announce an emergency board meeting in 1 hour, he was more annoyed than concerned. "Emergency, what emergency?" he barked into the intercom. "I didn't call a meeting." "No, sir." Chloe's voice trembled slightly. "The summons was issued by Mr. Abernathy and Mr. Petrov. It seems to concern a matter of corporate governance." Philip Abernathy and Nicholas Petrov. An odd pairing. Abernathy was a stick-in-the-mud academic type who sat on the board as an independent director, always harping on about ethics and long-term stability. Petrov was a relic from his father's era, a man whose loyalty he'd always taken for granted. "Fine," Jonathan snapped. "Tell them I'll be there, and get me coffee, a large one." He strode into the boardroom at precisely 10:00 a.m., radiating an aura of impatient authority. The long, polished mahogany table was already filled. The faces that looked back at him were unusually grim. Abernathy sat at the opposite end of the table, his expression placid. To his right sat Nicholas Petrov, his face carved from granite. Even Bryce Montgomery, seated to Jonathan's left, looked pale and sweaty. "All right, Philip." Jonathan began taking his seat at the head of the table. "What's so important? It couldn't wait for our scheduled meeting next week. I hope this isn't another lecture about our carbon footprint." Abernathy didn't smile. He simply slid a sheaf of papers across the table. "This is not about our carbon footprint, Jonathan. This is about a breach of fiduciary duty and a catastrophic failure of leadership." Jonathan laughed a short, sharp bark of disbelief. "A failure of... What are you talking about? Our stock is up 12% this quarter. The gala raised a record amount. I am delivering, Philip, as I always do." "You are delivering short-term gains at the expense of long-term solvency." Petrov's deep voice rumbled across the table. It was the first time the old man had spoken, and his words carried immense weight. "You've over-leveraged the company on speculative ventures, Jonathan. That mining deal in Colombia, it's a bust. The geologists' reports were falsified, and you never bothered with independent verification." Jonathan felt a prickle of unease. How did they know about that? He'd buried that report. "Furthermore," Abernathy continued, his voice calm and methodical, "we have evidence of significant misuse of corporate funds. Your personal jet, the renovations on your penthouse, the $50,000 watch you gifted to Veronica Lancaster at the gala last night, all billed to a corporate expense account." Bryce Montgomery sank lower in his chair, avoiding Jonathan's furious gaze. He must have been the leak, the spineless little traitor. "This is an ambush," Jonathan snarled, his voice low and dangerous. "You're twisting things. These are the costs of doing business, of maintaining an image. It's the image of a reckless gambler, not a CEO." Another board member, A stern woman named Helen Gable chimed in. "We have been watching Jonathan. We have been concerned. And now we have been presented with a viable alternative." Jonathan felt a cold knot of dread tighten in his stomach. "An alternative? What alternative are you bringing in an outside firm? Is this a hostile takeover?" This was the threat he had been fighting, the one he had been so sure he could defeat. "In a manner of speaking," Abernathy said. "The bylaws of Davenport Industries drafted by your father, I might add, include a morality clause, Clause 12B. It allows for the immediate removal of a CEO by a majority vote of the board if their actions, personal or professional, are deemed to bring the company into disrepute or place it in financial jeopardy." Jonathan stared at him, his mind racing. They couldn't. They wouldn't dare. He still held the largest single block of shares. "You don't have the votes," he said, his voice a confident bluff. "Oh, but we do," Philip said softly. "Over the past several months, a new majority shareholder has consolidated a controlling interest in this company. 51.2% to be precise. And this shareholder has voted in absentia in favor of your immediate removal as CEO." The room fell silent. The air crackled with tension. Jonathan felt like the floor had dropped out from beneath him. A new majority shareholder. How he had tracked every major trade. It was impossible. "Who?" he whispered, the single word. Barely audible. Philip Abernathy looked not at Jonathan, but at the grand double doors of the boardroom. This shareholder felt it was best to deliver the news in person. They also have a proposal for the new interim leadership. As if on cue, the doors swung open, and there stood Genevieve. She was not wearing a silk robe. She was dressed in a sharply tailored navy blue maternity business dress that commanded respect. Her hair was pulled back in a sleek chignon. Her face was calm, her eyes clear and steady. She looked powerful. She looked formidable. She looked like everything he had tried to convince himself she wasn't. She walked into the room, her heels clicking softly on the marble floor, the sound echoing the frantic, panicked beat of Jonathan's own heart. She didn't look at him. She walked to the empty chair beside Philip Abernathy and took her seat. The woman he had dismissed as too tired for events had just arrived at the most important one of her life. And his. The silence in the boardroom was absolute, a thick, suffocating blanket of disbelief. Every eye was fixed on Genevieve. The board members, men and women Jonathan had known for years, looked at her with a mixture of shock and dawning comprehension. Bryce Montgomery looked as if he was about to be physically ill. And Jonathan just stared, his mind refusing to process the scene before him. Genevieve, his quiet, gentle, pregnant wife. Here, at the head of his boardroom table. "What is this?" Jonathan finally managed to say, his voice a choked rasp. "Genevieve, what in God's name are you doing here? This is a private meeting." Genevieve finally turned her head and met his gaze. Her eyes were not the soft, adoring pools he was used to. They were chips of ice. "On the contrary, Jonathan," she said, her voice cool and even, carrying across the room with an authority that stunned him. "As the new majority shareholder of Davenport Industries, this meeting is very much my business. In fact, I believe you were just being informed that your tenure as CEO has come to an end." She slid a portfolio onto the table. "My legal team has prepared all the necessary documentation. The votes have been tallied and verified. The motion to remove you on the grounds of gross negligence and breach of the morality clause has passed." A low murmur went through the room. Nicholas Petrov nodded grimly. Helen Gable watched Genevieve with a look of intense, approving scrutiny. You! Jonathan sputtered a hysterical laugh, bubbling in his throat. You are the majority shareholder. That's impossible. With what money? Your little trust fund. He sneered, his arrogance a desperate shield against the rising tide of panic. Don't be ridiculous. This is some kind of joke, a pathetic cry for attention. My little trust fund, as you so charmingly call it, was merely the seed capital, Genevieve replied without flinching. It turns out that when you present a well-researched, data-driven case for mismanagement to a consortium of investors who are already losing faith in a volatile CEO, they are more than willing to pool their resources. They were just waiting for a leader. I provided that leadership. She held his gaze, and for the first time he saw not his wife, but a brilliant strategist, a formidable opponent who had been moving her pieces across the board, while he hadn't even realized they were playing a game. And now, she continued, turning her attention to the rest of the board, we must look to the future. The company is in a precarious position. Jonathan's reckless gambles have left us exposed. We need to stabilize, reassure the markets, and restore faith in the Davenport name. Philip Abernathy cleared his throat. The new majority shareholder has put forward a candidate for the position of interim chief executive officer, a candidate with an intimate knowledge of this company's assets and liabilities, a first-class degree in economics from a premier institution, and a vested personal interest in its long-term success. Jonathan felt a dizzying sense of vertigo. He looked from Abernathy's placid face to Genevieve's implacable one. No, he whispered. No, you can't. Genevieve stood up. The simple act was filled with a power that commanded the attention of everyone in the room. She was pregnant, yes, but she carried it not as a weakness, but as a source of undeniable strength. She was fighting for more than just herself now. Ladies and gentlemen of the board, she announced, her voice ringing with clarity and confidence, I am accepting the position of interim CEO of Davenport Industries, effective immediately. She walked to the head of the table, to the chair that had been his throne, the symbol of his power and identity. Jonathan remained frozen in his seat, a dethroned king watching a usurper claim his kingdom. My first act as CEO will be to initiate a full independent audit of the last 2 fiscal years, Genevieve declared. We will identify and halt all non-essential high-risk projects. We will freeze all non-essential executive expense accounts. Bryce, she said, her gaze falling on the trembling COO. You will have a list of the compromised projects on my desk within the hour, and you will cooperate fully with the auditors. Your continued employment depends on it. Bryce nodded mutely, his face ashen. Our priority is to cut the cancer of fiscal irresponsibility out of this company and return to the principles of integrity and sustainable growth on which it was founded by my father-in-law. Genevieve continued. We will reassure our employees, our partners, and our shareholders that Davenport Industries is in stable, capable hands. She took her place in the CEO's chair, placing her hands on the polished mahogany. It fit her. The horrifying truth was that it fit her perfectly. She looked at the stunned faces around the table, a silent challenge in her eyes. Are there any questions? She asked. For a long moment, there was only silence. Then the old, formidable Nicholas Petrov spoke, his voice resonating with finality. No, Madam CEO, he said, a slow smile spreading across his weathered face. No questions at all. Welcome aboard. One by one, the other board members began to nod their assent, their expressions shifting from shock to a grudging and then genuine respect. They were business people. They recognized power and competence when they saw it. Jonathan was invisible. He was a ghost in the room, a relic of a past regime. The woman he had patronized, dismissed, and confined to his home had just systematically and brilliantly dismantled his entire world in the space of 10 minutes. She hadn't just taken his company. She had taken his power, his identity, his very name, and made it her own. He finally pushed himself to his feet, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. Every eye turned to him. He opened his mouth, a torrent of rage threats and accusations rising in his throat. But no words came out. He looked at Genevieve, truly looked at her for the first time in years. He saw the intelligence he had ignored, the strength he had tried to suppress, and the determination he had fatally underestimated. And in that moment, he knew he was utterly and completely defeated. The drive home was a silent, suffocating ordeal. Jonathan sat in the back of his Maybach, staring out the window at a city that no longer felt like his. The news of his ousting would be breaking across the financial networks any minute. The humiliation was a physical thing, a hot, coiling serpent in his gut. He had been publicly executed, and the executioner was now sitting in the passenger seat, calmly taking a call. Genevieve spoke in low, measured tones, her voice the epitome of professional composure. "Yes, Helen, I agree. A press release should go out within the hour. Emphasize stability and a return to core values. No, do not mention Jonathan by name. Simply refer to a change in leadership. We need to control the narrative." She ended the call, and the silence descended again, heavier than before. The moment they stepped inside the palatial marble entrance hall of their home, the facade of civility shattered. "You!" Jonathan snarled, grabbing her arm. His fingers dug into her flesh, his face a mask of contorted rage. "You conniving, treacherous bitch! What have you done?" Genevieve met his fury with a chilling calm, her eyes not flinching from his. "Let go of my arm, Jonathan," she said, her voice dangerously quiet. "My entire life's work. My father's company. You stole it from me." He roared, his voice echoing in the vast empty space. "You with your quiet little smiles and your fake subservience. You were planning this all along. I did what was necessary to protect the company from you," she retorted, yanking her arm free from his grasp. "And to protect our child's future from your catastrophic ego." "Our child." He laughed, a bitter, broken sound. "You dare bring our child into this? You think using your pregnancy as some kind of shield makes this noble? You used our baby. You used my love for you." The hypocrisy of his words was so staggering that Genevieve couldn't help but laugh, a genuine, mirthless sound that seemed to shock him into silence. "Your love for me," she repeated, her voice dripping with scorn. "Don't you dare speak to me of love, Jonathan. Love isn't dismissing my thoughts and ambitions as cute. Love isn't telling the world I'm too tired and delicate to function while you're out preening for the cameras. Love isn't hiding me away because my pregnancy is an inconvenient disruption to your perfect curated life." She took a step closer, invading his space, her presence suddenly immense. "You don't love me. You love the idea of me. The beautiful silent wife who makes you look good. The mother of your heir. I was an accessory, Jonathan. A beautiful, expensive object to complete your collection." Every word was a perfectly aimed dart, puncturing his inflated self-importance. "And you want to talk about treachery?" she continued, her voice dropping to a fierce whisper. "Let's talk about Veronica Lancaster. Did you think I didn't know? The late-night strategy sessions, the business trip to Zurich that just happened to coincide with her ski vacation in St. Moritz, the $50,000 Patek Philippe." What you bought her last night with company money." Jonathan's face went white. He had been so careful, so certain of his own cleverness, so dismissive of her intelligence. "And let's talk about the real treachery," she pressed on, relentless. "Let's talk about the $1 billion you sank into a sham mining operation in Colombia, burying the geologist's report that told you it was worthless. You didn't just cheat on me, Jonathan. You cheated the shareholders. You cheated the employees whose pensions are tied to the company's stock. You cheated your own father's legacy. You were willing to burn $3 trillion of his life's work to the ground to cover up your own incompetence." He stared at her, speechless. The woman he thought he knew had been a phantom, a carefully constructed role she played to survive. This woman, this fierce, brilliant, ruthless strategist, was the real Genevieve, and she knew everything. How did you—" he stammered. "You're not the only one who can read a balance sheet," she said with a cold smile. "You just assumed I couldn't. You assumed I was busy picking out nursery colors. That was your biggest mistake. You never ever saw me." He sank down onto the bottom step of the grand staircase, his head in his hands. The fury had drained out of him, replaced by a hollow, cavernous emptiness. He had lost everything. The company, his reputation, his wife. All of it gone in a single morning. "What do you want, Genevieve?" he asked, his voice muffled. "A divorce, to take every last penny." Genevieve looked down at the broken man at her feet. She felt a flicker of something not pity, but a sad, final sense of closure. The man she had once loved was well and truly gone, if he had ever existed at all. "The divorce is a foregone conclusion, Jonathan. The lawyers will be in touch," she said, her voice devoid of emotion. "And I don't want your money. I have my own. What I wanted was to save this company, to build a legacy for our child that isn't founded on lies and arrogance." She turned and began to walk away, her posture erect, her steps sure and steady. "This house is a corporate asset, registered under the company's name," she said over her shoulder. "I'll be moving into a new place tomorrow. I'll have your personal belongings packed and sent to wherever you decide to go. You have 24 hours to vacate the premises." He looked up, his eyes wide with disbelief. "You're kicking me out of my own home." Genevieve paused at the door to the study, her new de facto office. "It stopped being your home when you treated it like a hotel, and me like its decorative manager," she said, her final words hanging in the air like a death sentence. "It's my company now, Jonathan, and this is just business." The first week of Genevieve Davenport's tenure as CEO was a whirlwind of controlled chaos. The financial world was buzzing with the news of Jonathan's spectacular fall from grace, but Genevieve refused to let the narrative be about gossip and scandal. She was all business. Her days started before sunrise and ended long after sunset. She moved through the executive suite of Davenport Industries, not with the tentative steps of a novice, but with the quiet, confident authority of a natural-born leader. The board, initially wary, was quickly won over by her sharp intellect and decisive action. She initiated the promised audit, which immediately began to uncover the full extent of Jonathan's fiscal recklessness. She met with department heads, not to issue commands, but to listen. She asked probing questions, absorbed complex information, and empowered her teams to find innovative solutions to the problems Jonathan had created or ignored. Morale, which had been plummeting under his tyrannical and erratic leadership, began to slowly tick upward. Employees who had lived in fear of Jonathan's temper now found themselves energized by a CEO who valued their expertise. Philip Abernathy and Nicholas Petrov became her staunchest allies, her private council of war. They helped her navigate the treacherous political waters of the board and provided the historical context she needed to make informed decisions. "You have your father-in-law's mind for business," Nicholas told her one evening as they reviewed quarterly projections in her new, much less ostentatious office. "He always said the greatest asset of a company wasn't its capital, but its people." Jonathan forgot that. "You, my dear, understand it implicitly." But while Genevieve was shoring up the foundations of the company, Jonathan was busy trying to tear them down. Cast out from his home and his company, he was a man unmoored, consumed by a venomous rage. He holed up in a suite at the Four Seasons, living off the dregs of his personal accounts, and began his counteroffensive. He called every board member, every investor, every contact he had. He tried to paint Genevieve as an emotional, unstable pregnant woman on a hormonal power trip. "She's being manipulated," he'd rave down the phone line. "Abernathy is pulling her strings. She doesn't know what she's doing. She'll run the company into the ground." But his frantic, angry calls only served to reinforce the board's decision. They had seen Genevieve in action. They had seen her calm, her intelligence, her strategic mind, and they contrasted it with the picture of the unhinged, ranting man on the other end of the line. Jonathan's campaign backfired, cementing their loyalty to their new CEO. Desperate, he played his final card, their unborn child. He leaked a story to a notorious gossip columnist, a carefully crafted piece of propaganda, painting him as a concerned father-to-be worried for his unstable wife and the health of their baby under the immense stress of a job she was unqualified to handle. "All I want is what's best for my wife and my child," the article quoted him as saying. "I'm begging her to step down to come home and rest. The company isn't important. Our family is." The article caused a stir, but not the one he intended. Genevieve's response was swift and masterful. She didn't issue a denial. She didn't engage in a war of words. Instead, she announced a new company-wide parental leave policy, one of the most generous in the country. It offered 6 months of fully paid leave for all new parents, regardless of gender-flexible return-to-work options and on-site childcare facilities, to be built at the company's main campus. In a single brilliant move, she had transformed his narrative. He had tried to use her pregnancy as a weapon against her. She turned it into a symbol of her progressive, forward-thinking leadership. The story was no longer about a hysterical pregnant woman, but about a visionary CEO championing family values. She won the news cycle, the loyalty of her employees, and the admiration of the public. Jonathan's humiliation was complete. He had become a caricature, a bitter, powerless man screaming into the wind. One afternoon, he showed up at the Davenport Industries building demanding to see her. He was unshaven, his expensive suit rumpled. The security guards, following strict orders from Genevieve, politely but firmly denied him entry. He caused a scene in the lobby, shouting her name, his voice echoing off the marble walls. From her office window high above, Genevieve watched the security guards escort him out of the building. He looked so small from up there, a pathetic, flailing figure against the vast backdrop of the city. She felt no anger, no triumph, only a profound and weary sadness for the man he might have been, and for the love she had thought they shared. She turned away from the window and placed a hand on her stomach. The baby kicked a strong, steady rhythm. A promise. "It's just us now," she whispered, "and we are going to build something that lasts." The new order had been established. The Queen was on the throne, the old king was in exile, and the future of the Davenport Empire was for the first time in a long time secure. 3 months after Genevieve seized control of her destiny, the final remnants of Jonathan's reign were being swept away. The process was not a dramatic battle, but a slow, methodical legal dissection, a procedure Genevieve oversaw with the same cool precision she applied to corporate restructuring. She met with her legal team in the main conference room, the very space where her coup had taken place. The long mahogany table no longer felt like an enemy stronghold. It was now her workbench. "He's refusing to sign the final property transfer," said Leo, her lead counsel, a sharp man with tired eyes. "He's claiming sentimental attachment to the city penthouse." Genevieve looked at the document on the tablet in front of her, a blueprint of her old life. The penthouse was purchased with a corporate line of credit that he never serviced. It is an asset of Davenport Industries. His sentiment is irrelevant. Her voice was calm, without a trace of malice. It was the voice of a CEO, not an ex-wife. "Send him the bill for the outstanding credit plus interest effective today. Let him know that if it's not settled within 48 hours, we will begin foreclosure proceedings. That should resolve his attachment." Leo allowed a thin smile. "Consider it done." The final pathetic confrontation happened not in a boardroom, but in the sterile, echoing confines of the underground parking garage. Genevieve had been working late finalizing the new parental leave policy. As she walked toward her car, a figure stepped out from behind a concrete pillar. It was Jonathan. He looked like a ghost of the man he'd been. The tailored suit was gone, replaced by jeans and a rumpled jacket. His face was gaunt, his eyes holding a desperate, hunted look. "Genevieve," he said, his voice hoarse. He took a step forward. Her security detail, a discreet man named Frank, immediately moved to intercept. "It's all right, Frank. I'll handle this," Genevieve said. Her hand held up to stop him, though she didn't take her eyes off Jonathan. "I just needed to see you," Jonathan pleaded, his voice cracking, away from the lawyers, the board. "Just us." "There is no us anymore, Jonathan," she said, her tone flat. "There hasn't been for a very long time. I know what I did. I know I was a fool." He said, his words tumbling out in a torrent of self-pity. "I was arrogant. I was blind. I looked at you, and I saw a reflection of myself. It's all I knew how to see. But I'm sorry. God, Genevieve, I am so sorry." He took another step, his hands outstretched. "They're trying to take everything from me. You are the one who leveraged everything against bad debts and worse decisions." She countered, her voice cutting through his performance. "You did this to yourself." His eyes fell to the swell of her stomach, now prominent and undeniable beneath her coat. A flicker of something cunning and desperate entered his eyes. "Our child, Jenan. Don't do this to our child. She deserves a father. I know I messed up, but I can be a good father. Please don't take my child away from me." He even tried to reach out to place a hand on her belly. Genevieve recoiled, as if his hand were a hot iron. The movement was sharp, instinctual, and utterly final. "Stop," she commanded, and the single word had more power than any of his shouted tirades ever did. "Do not ever presume to speak about what my child deserves. A father doesn't try to use his wife's pregnancy to have her declared mentally incompetent in a pathetic attempt to regain his position. A father doesn't see his unborn child as a bargaining chip, a last-ditch piece of leverage to be played. You don't want to be a father, Jonathan. You just want to win. And you've lost. She looked him directly in the eye, letting him see the absolute absence of pity. "You will sign the papers. You will take the settlement offered. You will have no legal rights, no visitation, no contact. You will be a biological footnote in our daughter's story. You gave up the privilege of being a father when you proved you were utterly incapable of being an honorable man. Now get out of my way." She walked past him without a backward glance. He didn't follow. He simply stood there, a broken statue in the dim light of the garage, as the sound of her car driving away echoed his defeat. The next morning, her lawyers received the signed documents. Every last tie was severed. Weeks later, Genevieve went into labor. It was Philip Abernathy, her mentor and friend, who sat in the waiting room, a calming, paternal presence, who had become more of a father to her than her own had ever been. After 12 hours, she gave birth to a healthy 7-pound baby girl. She had a full head of dark hair, and when the nurse placed the swaddled infant in Genevieve's arms, the baby opened her eyes. They were a startling, piercing shade of blue. Jonathan's eyes. For a single, terrifying second, Genevieve's breath caught in her throat. A shadow of him, of the pain and the betrayal, threatened to cloud this perfect moment. But then the baby blinked, and the tiny face broke into a grimace that was all her own. She curled a tiny, perfect hand around Genevieve's finger, her grip surprisingly strong. In that moment, the shadow vanished. These weren't Jonathan's eyes. They were her daughter's eyes, and they were looking at her with nothing but pure, unfiltered need. Genevieve's heart swelled with a love so fierce and protective it was like a physical force. She named her Hope. Returning to work was another strategic operation. The on-site nursery she had championed was now open, a bright, cheerful space filled with laughter. On her first day back, she walked into the building carrying Hope in a sleek, modern baby carrier. She stopped at the nursery, handed her daughter over to the loving care of the staff, and then proceeded to the 80th floor. The message was clear and powerful. Motherhood was not a liability. It was part of the new corporate culture. She could be a mother and a CEO, and she had built a company where others could do the same. The final act of the drama unfolded on a quiet Tuesday afternoon. Genevieve was leading a video conference with the board, outlining her 5-year plan for expanding into sustainable technologies. She was passionate, her arguments backed by data, her vision clear. In the middle of her presentation, her office door opened quietly. It was Frank, her head of security. He didn't speak, merely placed a single sealed manila envelope on the desk beside her. She held up a hand to the screen. "Excuse me for one moment, gentlemen," she said, her voice smooth. She opened the envelope. It wasn't a note. It was a standard security report. It contained a photograph of Jonathan at an airport check-in counter, looking thin and anonymous. It included a copy of a flight manifest. Passenger Davenport J Seat 14A. Destination Singapore. Ticket one way. He was gone. Not just defeated, but erased. An exile of his own making. A profound, shuddering sense of peace washed over her. It was the feeling of a long, brutal war, finally ending. She closed the envelope and looked back at the screen at the faces of the men and women who had bet on her. "Now, gentlemen," she said, a new warmth in her voice, "about our projections for Q3. Later that evening, she stood in the nursery, holding her sleeping daughter. The lights of the city glittered below them, a galaxy of possibilities. She held Hope close her cheek against the baby's soft hair, breathing in her sweet, innocent scent. This was the real inheritance. Not the shares, not the title, not the corner office. It was this tiny, perfect life. It was the freedom to build a world for her daughter on foundations of truth and strength, not lies and vanity. She looked at their reflection in the dark glass, a mother and her child silhouetted against the empire she commanded. She had been the caged bird. Now she owned the sky, and she was finally, truly, completely free. And that's the incredible story of Genevieve Davenport. It's a powerful reminder that the people you underestimate are often the ones with the most strength, hiding just beneath the surface. Her journey wasn't just about taking over a company. It was about reclaiming her own voice, her own power, and her own identity from a man who refused to see her. What did you think of Jonathan's downfall? Was it justified? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you were captivated by this story of drama betrayal and ultimate empowerment, please give this video a thumbs up. It really helps the channel grow. Don't forget to share this with someone who loves a story where the underdog comes out on top. And most importantly, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you won't miss our next deep dive into stories you won't believe are real. Thanks for listening.